Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this episode of On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. I have two very entertaining and fun guests today, Christina and Cindy, who are from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Nice to see both of you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Of course. And where are you guys joining from?
We are in O'Fallon, Illinois, which is about 30 minutes east of St. Louis, Missouri. We're on the Illinois side of the Mississippi.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we appreciate you guys spending the time with us today. The topic we're going to talk about today is caregivers and how you guys work with caregiving professionals, families, seniors. So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us about your company and what you do?
My name is Cindy, and I'm a physical therapist. I have been practicing for probably about 32 years, and the majority of that has been in the home health realm. Yep. And I'm a co-founder of Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner.
And my name's Christina. I'm a speech-language pathologist, co-founder of Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. And the majority of my career has been spent helping people that are living in long-term care or in a nursing home in a rehab facility. I did a little stint in home health. So that's kind of how we started Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner was during both of our stints in home health.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, we were kind of thinking about in the home health, you see the people, you leave the people, and there's always questions. There's always questions. So we started our short little videos on YouTube to try to answer those questions for caregivers because, it's always, you ask if you have any more other questions today. No, I'm good. As soon as you leave the door.
The questions are there.
We would leave the link to if we made a video that was pertaining to the training that we were doing with them or the family, we would leave that behind and then they could watch it. And then we came back for a treatment, then they could ask us their questions. But we always had questions.
Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine. And I know you guys have developed a really great following on YouTube in particular and LinkedIn, which I've watched a bunch of the videos and they're great. And they're very entertaining. You're not just, they're not just instructional. So I highly recommend people check them out.
We try to provide a little bit of levity. It can be kind of an overwhelming situation for family caregivers in particular. Sometimes they become a caregiver overnight and I think it can weigh on them. Yeah. So, we always try, and I think that's just therapy in general. When you're trying to help somebody recover from something or, maintain their functional independence, you kind of want to do that distract, look over here and entertain that it's like, it's not work. It's actually, they're having fun while they're recuperating.
Right.
So,
Especially being a physical therapist, the code word is physical torturist or something like that. So you got to bring some lightness to it. It's like, no,
I did physical therapy once, and that's probably a pretty good explanation for it not being particularly comfortable.
Look over here.
Right, exactly. Look at this shiny object over here.
Exactly right.
Well, that's great. Well, you guys have a very unique background. So it sounds like you got into this space just seeing the needs of seniors that you were working with on the therapy side. I know you're both on two different sides of that, but it sounds like you saw a need and you fill it, and that's great. I think seniors need more people who just see the areas where they need help. And they find ways to help them. And so I think it's great what you guys are doing.
Thank you. It's, when we started it, so we started it just because of our own practices and being in home health. And then it started getting traction. So we decided to put a website together and then start taking some of those videos that we make that are more about the physical part of caregiving and showing them how to save, the good body mechanics and how to keep your loved ones safe too, and put those behind a paid wall, so a subscription wall, and turned our YouTube channel over to more of a product review. Yeah. So product review videos. So it's been a journey, and so it's been difficult because what we do, Mark, isn't sexy, with therapy and with home health and just healthcare in general.
Right.
We've been doing this really since 2020, I think 2015.
14,
yeah. And then we started when we made a business out of it. We started it. We went live in January of 2020, which was when COVID started. And then we went into, here in Illinois, we went into quarantine like in March of that year.
Yeah.
So my advice to people in the audience, don't start a business during pandemic.
It's not
Yeah.
great.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, if you can get through it then, you can get through it any time.
It's downhill from
But
here.
don't start a restaurant during COVID.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
right.
Well, so okay, so tell us what is the website and give us some examples of videos that might be on there if people wanted to subscribe.
It's adaptiveequipmentcorner.com or aecorner.com. And under the subscription, we have all kinds of things. Like, again, it's the physical aspect of caregiving. We try to break it down by room to make it easy to absorb. So we talk about the bedroom, we talk about the bathroom, different things like that. We talk about home safety toolkit and things like that. So we show transfers, and that means getting somebody physically from one position to another. So like maybe you got to get your loved one up from a chair into a wheelchair or out of the bed into a wheelchair. So we talk about the different levels of that in regards to how much effort the caregiver is going to have to, take on to help their person do that. So we break those transfers down. We break down bed mobility. And a lot of times that's difficult. How do you slide somebody up in a regular bed on your own if they can't do much themselves? So a lot of the physical aspects in and out of the shower or bath, not down in the bathtub, but with a chair, on and off the toilet, in and out of the car, all kinds of physical aspects, as well as when it gets on the higher end of what the caregiver has to do as far as effort, what kind of tools, are there? Or do we need a mechanical lift in here to help move mom from her bed to her wheelchair because she is totally dependent? So those are the things that we go over with the physical aspect.
Yeah, we also have a couple other series that your audience might find interesting. So we've got a series about getting prepared for total knee replacement, and then another series about getting prepared for total hip replacement. When we were in home health, what we found is there was that, the caregiver goes with the family member to the surgeon and they do a 1 hour education on it. And then again, any questions? We just threw all this information at you. Any questions before you go back home? No. And so what we found is they had a lot of questions. And so we put those two series together to try to help answer those questions and get ready, because in therapy, I think in general, humans, we're not proactive for the most part,
Right.
So it we gear it towards those people that if we can make you proactive, before the surgery, get your house ready, then, nobody wants to go back into the hospital, right? So if we can make that transition from the surgery center or from the hospital back to home as safe as possible and as comfortable as possible. So we've got a couple series about that is geared more towards knee replacement and hip replacements.
Yeah. Well, those are very common. Yeah. My family's been through one and we'll probably have another one soon. And it's not easy to recover from those types of surgeries, especially as you're aging. So I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess more of a question than a statement, but do you find that most people have like an incident, let's just say that all of a sudden now they need caregiving and maybe modifications to the home or plans for how they're going to be more mobile? Or do you find that seniors are more needing these services as they slowly deteriorate over time physically?
We prefer that. Well, and our videos are geared towards the family caregiver. So we're kind of hoping that the family caregiver will be able to watch these videos and help their loved one with that preparing process. So, but like I said, most of the time, being prepared ahead of time is just not in our genes, I think, for the most part.
Right. That's an interesting question too, though, because I know we all don't like the fact or don't want to admit the fact that we're aging, but it's something that you really should be taking, thought in as you age and, thinking about your home. And is this going to be a home that's going to sustain me for, into my later years? And what if my mobility changes? That's part of, most of the time we get that, like Christina was saying, that hair on fire. I'm all of a sudden a caregiver. My loved one is all of a sudden injured and we got to bring them home and the house isn't set up. Yeah. It's very hard. Again, we preach proactiveness, but it's hard to think in that mindset until you're there. Yeah. So it's usually an emergency. But really, we like to encourage people just aging. I mean, knock on wood, we don't want anything to happen, but statistics show that as we age, things are going to change and things are going to, fall risk goes up, strength goes down, mobility goes down. So there's are things that besides getting your house ready, and there are other things you can do to be proactive, whether it's, taking good care of yourself and exercise and all that other stuff. But the house is something that we really need to, if we're set on, hey, this is where I'm going to be, until whenever, then we really need to start thinking about what is it going to take for me to stay here.
I think it's hard for people to see, especially if it's their forever home.
Right.
You age into that home, right? And I know this home. I know it like the back of my hand. And so as you get older, you just don't see ever needing to change anything about your home because it's so familiar to you. So I think it kind of lends itself to maybe some complicitness as we get older. But that's what we're trying to do is to raise people's awareness that, if you can plan ahead, like you do people with a will financially, right? You plan ahead and you make these plans for when you get older. This should be the same thing.
Right.
There should be some kind of a checklist. We've got a checklist. Yeah. Go through the home, check things off, see if there are things that you can, that you could change or update or add to as you age, and then maybe just review it periodically, like you would your will and testament, right?
Right. I wish people would prepare to that degree. It would make things
that would be awesome.
Easier. Even when you're buying the home, you should be thinking 10 years ahead, because stairs, I'm sure, a big part of the planning process for these types of situations. I know my family's thought about, single level home for my parents instead of a dual level. Trying to stay ahead of that is easier said than done because it's not in your mind when there's not an immediate need. And I would imagine that people don't know what modifications they might need to their home until they're in that situation and can really see, okay, you always think, oh, I'll be able to get out of bed on my own. I'll be able to do all this stuff on my own, no problem.
Right.
Maybe with a little assistance. And then you're actually in it. Right. And you realize that may not be feasible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah. So what sort of modifications, let's say, somebody is returning home and their home just is not quite set up for that. What type of modifications are you talking with people about potentially making, and how do you uncover where the safety hazards are in any given home?
Yeah.
I think the first thing that we do, our main focus initially, especially since it's always usually an emergent situation, is to look at the small, we like to go in and say we kind of triage things. We look at the small things. What are the small things that we can change pretty quickly and inexpensively to get them home and get them safe? So we are looking at what's their pathway in, to the house. And we need to make sure they're getting trained. If there's a step or two, they need to have training before they leave the hospital on, depending on, are they mobile? Are they not? Do they have a weight bearing restriction? What device are they using? And if there's a wheelchair involved, do you have a way to get them in? Or do we need to think about a temporary ramp, a rental or something? Inside the home, we're looking at pathways. What are they on? Are they on a walker, in a wheelchair? The width of the pathways need to be appropriate for those mobility devices, especially to the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom, and what we call their comfy chair. We look at the bathroom and say, do you have a tub shower? Do you have a walk-in shower? What's your endurance like? Are you going to have to sit down? Do you need to sit down? And what's your balance like? So we look at those aspects. So those, things like a tub transfer bench or a shower chair. It's a little bit more difficult when you're talking about, depending on the timing, we always like to have mounted grab bars. That's a huge thing. And even as we age, we really should be thinking about that anyhow, in the bathroom, especially a high risk, high fall area. There's nothing soft in the bathroom. No. So you fall and you're going to probably have an injury. Crunchy. So we're thinking about those things, and we're not big advocates of the suction grab bars just because they're not reliable. So, the grab bar is sometimes a hurdle, because if it's an emergent situation, trying to get somebody to put it on or put it, if you don't have somebody, is the situation. And then we look at the comfy chair height, because inevitably, if you've been in the hospital, you're probably weak. And that chair that you could easily get out of before may not be so easy to get out of. So we're looking at the height of that and what can we do, whether we have a platform that we need to set it on or furniture risers. We're looking at toilet height, because toilets are not easy to get off of, especially if you don't have a good handhold to push off of. And contrary to popular belief, pushing off of the toilet paper holder or pulling up from a towel holder or towel rack is not appropriate. Not a good place.
It happens more than you care to know.
I would imagine that usually involves some wall repair.
It does.
At some point.
It's not picking somebody up off the floor. So yeah. And then the other thing, kind of the triage, is the bed height. These beds now are too high. And so are you going to be able to get into the bed comfortably? So those are the things that we take a look at more along the triage part of things. When you're talking more about a home remodel, then you're looking more at, this can't be done an emergent type of thing, or shouldn't be done. I mean, because you're gonna pay more, you're gonna make some mistakes if it's all in an emergent type of situation. So again, planning ahead.
Yeah.
And and on our video, on the subscription videos, we have a checklist. So if whoever subscribes to it, we've got a series called the Home Safety Toolkit. It's got a checklist. The caregiver would go through the house with the checklist and check the areas they're concerned with. My advice would be, if you could do it before you go get your loved one from the hospital or the facility, go through the house, check off the areas that you're concerned with, take it to the therapist, take it to the social worker, and say, here's the areas that because they don't want you to come back as much as your loved one doesn't want to come back, right? I mean, because that's money out of their pocket having to take care. So, go through the house, give that to the social worker, to the therapist, and then see what they can do to either show you the products that you're going to need, or maybe they could come out and help you install the products or help you find ways to get the products, And so I think that would be really helpful for people to be proactive.
Sure. And it's probably hard for them to do that if their loved one has just had surgery or is recovering from a fall or whatever it may be in the hospital. They're so focused on just caring for them and being there and being present that it's probably hard for them to think about, we're going to shift to a different stage.
Yeah, we get people that call and they're brand new caregivers. I got to go get mom from the hospital, and maybe they got a few days, maybe they got a couple of weeks. And so instead of, they don't have time, but so they go out and they buy the equipment that they think their parent will need coming back to the home. And maybe there's some stuff that they didn't need, and so now they've got this extra equipment that they just won't use. I mean, that's money out of their pocket, so if there's a way that we can try to help save the caregiver money as well, because not only is caregiving hard on your body, it's hard on a person's wallet too.
Right. Oh, for sure. And especially if you're talking about more substantial modifications to the home itself, the products, maybe the family can chip in, or the senior has some money laying around that they can buy a ramp and they can buy things that will help with mobility. But as you get into the more substantial changes, like a lift to go upstairs, or widening doorways, or repairing those walls that have been damaged from trying to use a toilet paper holder to stand up with, the costs get higher. So have you seen families that either don't do modifications because they don't have the funds to be able to do them, or maybe they end up even moving out of the home because it just doesn't work for them, even though if they had some money, they could modify and stay home if that's their preference?
Yes. We, because caregiving, again, is not only hard on a person's body, it's hard on a wallet too. When we go in, we try to give people recommendations as far as resources that could help with, maybe you have to put a hospital bed downstairs, their bedroom's upstairs, but for the time being you need to, rent a hospital bed or borrow a hospital bed and put it downstairs for the time being. Maybe you need to move. Maybe their bedroom is on the same level, but the bed's over this way and that's on their weak side. So maybe you have to push the bed over this way and move some furniture around. So we try to think of ways that are going to help save them money. So one of the resources that we usually recommend a lot, or a couple of resources that we recommend, is there are health equipment lending programs out there, or lending closets, what they call them, lending closets. And they will collect donations of gently used equipment They will clean it up, and then they will usually allow residents to borrow it for low or no cost. And so that way, if you go get something that maybe your parent didn't need, then you can just return it. It's no money out of your pocket, right? So
Right.
we always ask people to find if there's a local lending closet. Check with a church or a synagogue and see, because sometimes they'll have wheelchairs or walkers or canes or something. Check and see with a local hospice company. Lots of times when family members lose their loved one, they will give that equipment over to the hospice company because, first of all, they think, well, the hospice might have paid for it, so they just return it. But then the hospice has it. So what are they going to do with it? So they might be able to lend it out. Maybe with fraternal organizations, they might have a small lending closet. Ask in your neighborhood, especially if you're in some kind of a senior community, right? I guarantee you somebody has a little tiny closet under their steps that's got Uncle Joe's water in there, right?
Got some extra stuff in the garage that might be helpful for others. Yeah.
Right. And then there's another resource that we recommend is the assistive technology program. Every state has an AT program. So we recommend that you find out who your AT program is and see if they have a lending program that you could borrow some of the equipment from while they're recuperating.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Those are great resources for people, especially for the equipment side of it. Obviously, people probably aren't going to lend their houses to other people to live in that are modified more. But that's one area where, on the financing side, we can help. So if people have a more substantial need, if you need $1,000, you don't want to take a mortgage for that.
Right.
But oftentimes seniors have a lot of equity in their home that can be used to be able to hopefully keep them in the home safely, and make the modifications they may need, whether it be, widening doorways, making a bathroom larger so that it can accommodate a wheelchair, or just more room to maneuver, sidebars, safety issues, new shower, all those types of things can get fairly expensive, when you're actually making modifications to the home.
Right.
And that's where our products can come in and really help people is, having creative ways for seniors to qualify, because that's the biggest issue seniors have when they're looking for some sort of financing to be able to fulfill a need, whether it be for home modifications or paying for care. That's a whole separate topic of the cost of care. But we find that most people want to stay home, but oftentimes they think either the home just doesn't suit their new situation, or they think that, they can't afford the actual care itself. And so those are the types of solutions we can provide with people so that they can ideally stay in the home if that's their desires.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And the key is trying to find programs that allow them to actually qualify, because it's great to have loans, but if seniors can't qualify for them, then it's not going to help anyone. So, that's kind of where we come in. Have you guys seen anyone, like any families seeking out financing solutions to pay for those, or maybe unfortunately just making the decision that there's no way we can do this, so we just end up selling the home?
We probably see that more than the modifying the home. We probably see more of it's usually at that point it's the adult child that's, there has to be some kind of happy medium between them being the caregiver and then their family member staying in the home, and so probably more than any time we see, the family caregiver selling the home and moving them to an assisted living, because not only do they need modification to the home, but they need more physical care than maybe what the family caregiver is able to do.
Right. Yeah. Family caregiving is tough, and hiring a professional is quite expensive. If you need 24-hour care or close to it, can be many, many thousands per month. And we, just like you said, the common theme is for people to sell their homes to then pay for the care of the assisted living, even when the family prefers not to move the senior.
Yep.
And so that's where, that's the most rewarding thing that we can do, is when a family would prefer to keep the senior at home. And the senior, that's what the senior wants, to be able to fulfill that need or request from the family by having creative financing that allows them to use the home as collateral for a loan that would allow them to pay for the care and to stay in their home as long as they need or want to do so. So that's, for me, the most rewarding part of what we do, is helping a family figure that out. And there are some creative ways that we can do that. So yeah, if anybody's checking out this episode and you're dealing with these issues that, my friends here are talking about, and you're wondering, God, if I could just make these modifications, maybe mom and dad could stay home. That's there are ways to do that. And that's the message that we're trying to get out to people, because I think people oftentimes just don't know that these options are at their fingertips. And that's why we create the podcast and the videos that we create, and the same thing for you. And so we just love highlighting people like the two of you who are doing good things, who, you guys are being very, you're not bragging about the number of people that watch your videos, but I know it's a very high number, and I see the thing behind you on your stand over there.
It's years in the making. That's years in the making.
I get it, but an accomplishment that you should definitely celebrate, because not because of the number of followers or views, but more because of the number of people you're helping. So
we appreciate that. Mark, too, and just, when we spoke before and you reaching out to us, as a healthcare professional and seeing a lot of people in their homes, that doesn't come to top of my mind as to, is there a creative way I can, the first thing most people are thinking about is, I got to sell this house because I've got to have the money to do X, Y, and Z. So, that's awesome to have that.
Another option.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, that's our biggest challenge, is getting to, as many eyes and families as possible to be able to get this message out. Because I think the vast majority of people don't want to age anywhere but their own home. Right. Not true for everyone. Some people just don't have the choice to stay at home, but people make that decision. And then there's also the tax implications of selling the home. For seniors, the common thread for seniors that are aging right now is that they're what we call a buy and hold generation. So they probably bought their homes maybe decades ago. Now they have all this built up potential capital gains tax. So if they sell the home, they may be paying a huge tax. And instead of giving the money to their heirs, eventually they give it to the IRS. But there's something called a step up in basis, where if you sell the home after the senior passes, there may be no capital gains tax at all, especially on high end homes. And we've come across situations where people wrote $1 million check to the IRS unnecessarily. Sometimes it just becomes, even if the senior can't stay in the home, just keeping the home for a period of time, maybe renting it out, maybe leaving it vacant, maybe a family member who's in, whatever it may be, but just not selling it while the senior is still aging can save a ton of money in taxes. So sometimes our products are there for tax mitigation strategies more so than actually modifying the home. Maybe leave the home exactly as it is. You just never know.
Wow, that's good to know too.
That is. I love hearing that there's another option, because it just seems so black or white. The situations we usually walk into are usually black and white, and so it's nice that there is another option for people.
Yes, for sure. We want to return color to the spectrum of black and white. There are lots of shades of different colors. And speaking of color, thank you both for being colorful and for being advocates for seniors and their caregivers and their homes and all the things that you do. And I just really appreciate everything you're doing. And seniors and the world needs more people like you. So that's why I wanted to highlight both of you. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
We appreciate, thanks for having us. We appreciate you thinking of us to have us on your show.
Absolutely. And once again, tell us the website where people can go if they want to check out the videos and find more about you.
aecorner.com.
Or follow us on YouTube. We got everything on YouTube. That's where we started.
Perfect. All right. Well, I hope this gives you a little boost so you get another plaque behind you by the time we talk again. And thank you again so much for joining. And thank you to our audience today on the Mark Financial Forum and podcast. We will see you next time. Take care.